Easter is not just a day, right? It's an entire season. And it's a season, again, in which we ask, not so much what happened to Jesus' body, but why don't we look more resurrected, and what would it look like to be that, and how do we live into that? And so the scriptures during this season are often these kind of post-resurrection, these appearances where Jesus kind of shows up to the disciples. And there's a lot going on in that. Some of it is not really about what we think, like, how the different gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, have different stories of that first Easter morning. Maybe the women get there, maybe Peter gets there, maybe it's kind of a foot race to see who's going to get to the tomb. And that really says a lot about kind of competition in the early church, really, about who's going to be the main person we follow. So, or who's going to be the official leader. So there's a lot going on in these scriptures that, is kind of about the community also trying to form itself and trying to also kind of convince the world, hey, this God we follow is one who really can overcome death and anger and rage and all of that. So the passage this morning is in Luke 24. I haven't preached this in like 31 years, but I love it. And it's verses 35 through 43. And in this passage, it comes, so this is basically Easter afternoon or Easter evening, right? There's been the story of the resurrection. Then there's been this sort of familiar story of the road to Emmaus. Remember, the two people are walking along and Jesus appears and they don't recognize Jesus. And then they break the bread. Jesus breaks the bread. It says he takes it and blesses it and breaks it, gives it to them. And then their eyes are open. And we've talked a lot about that, about how our own bodies are like that. We take our lives and we're blessed, right? God calls us all beloved. And in our own brokenness, then that's when we really can give ourselves to the world, right? So this has just happened. And now these followers have gone back to Jerusalem and there's a bunch of people there and they're talking about it. And then Jesus is going to appear again to them and they're going to be like, who is this? Then they told what had happened on the road and how Jesus had been known to them in the breaking of the bread. While they were there talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, peace be with you. And they were startled and terrified and thought that they were seeing a ghost. And Jesus said to them, why are you frightened and why did doubts arise in your hearts? Look at my hands and my feet. See that it is I myself. Touch me and see, for a ghost does not have flesh and bones as you see that I have. And when Jesus had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. While in their joy, they were disbelieving and still wondering. He said to them, have you anything here to eat? And they gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence.